I was in my home office filling out an invoice for one of my clients when I heard the front door open. I usually call out to my wife, Christine, to say hello and let her know I'm home. The reason I didn't do it right away was because I was in the middle of entering expense details and didn't want to interrupt. This delay turned out to be beneficial for me. "Hey, girl, Jerry's not home, right?" I heard the voice, and I recognized it. It was our neighbor, Sandra, also one of Christine's closest friends. She must have come over as soon as she saw Christine had arrived home. "No, his car isn't on the driveway or in the garage," she said. "He mentioned he had some business to attend to today." "What's up?" my wife replied. Walking into the kitchen. "I'm home without a car just because it's being serviced. The dealer dropped me off at home since it's closer than my office. I often work from home, so it's just as good as working in my downtown office." "That's great. Do you want to have some fun today?" Sandra asked. "Do you want to enjoy a sexual encounter?" Now that definitely caught my attention. I completely forgot about the invoice. I reached for my phone and started recording. Christine giggled. "I'd love to, but it's too sudden. I'm not sure if I can get away. Jerry mentioned we're going out for dinner tonight." I decided to relax and have a couple of drinks. My home office is a converted room next to the kitchen. I turned off the desk lamp. I turned off the computer monitor. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't want either of the women to realize I was eavesdropping. I heard the clinking of glasses. They were too busy getting out the wine glasses to hear me come over. Tammy was supposed to be my friend today, but her mom called to say she wasn't feeling well, sick in the stomach, so Tammy had to go help out. Sandra said that we had plans with Eric and Richie. Tammy was the third member of the trio. They had been calling themselves the Three Musketeers since they started college. Sandra and Christine went to the same high school. Tammy joined them in their first year of college. They spent most of their college years living in the same room. I've always suspected they shared more than just an apartment. I met Christine in college. We started dating in my senior year, so I know Tammy and Sandra very well. Both ladies have a succubus-like sexual desire and moral character. If they slightly liked the guy, they would quickly jump into bed with him. They have both suggested several times that I try it. I refused because I was with Christine. Christine is more conservative, the most cautious one in the group. She never approved, but she also didn't preach. At least, that's the impression I got during our dating period and throughout our 7 years of marriage. To be honest, before we met, she was quite sexually active. But after that, she has always been loyal to me. I have never had a reason to doubt her, until this moment. After hearing this conversation, I realized that my trust in my wife's loyalty was completely misplaced. Sandra is on her third marriage. She and her first 2 husbands couldn't refrain from having affairs. This certainly applies to her first husband, who would get any girl willing to stay. For a long time. The second husband started an affair after discovering Sandra's affair with a colleague. I think it's justified, because he had already filed for divorce. Of course, Sandra claimed it was cheating. According to her twisted logic, she can do whatever she wants, but her husband must be loyal. I like her current husband. He works for the same company, as a service representative. He has to travel several times a month. He's a hard-working man and a friend. He met Sandra at a party I invited him to. He and Sandra have been married for almost 2 years. As soon as the house on the street next door became available, they bought it. Tammy has never been married. She's been engaged several times, but every time she was a coward. I suspect she values her freedom more than a husband. She jokes that variety is the spice of life. "You know how much I would love to go with you and have some fun. But I love Jerry. I don't want to ruin my relationship with Jerry just because you love him." "Just because you love him, doesn't mean you don't deserve to have a little fun," Sandra said. "These guys are just a stress relief. They certainly don't pretend to be long-term relationships. Just toys. I take them. Bob's not in town," asked Christine. Sandra replied, "Yes, see you tomorrow." So she wants to go have some fun today. I mean, enjoy a lot. Christine giggled. I bet they take Viagra every time they go on a date. No, no one I know can last as long as they can. So why do you need me today? Christine asked. If you're not going, I'll have to choose between Eric or Richard. Whoever stays will be furious. My issue is to get away, Christine said. I usually just go with you and Tammy. When Jerry goes to the fishing camp, he thinks I don't like sitting in the swamp. Sometimes I do. I might have to give up these little toys soon. We're thinking about having children. These guys are not enough. Like Bob, to take a risk. Well, how about this? You tell Jerry that Tammy just broke up with her last boyfriend. By the way, that's true. She's very worried about it. So we have to go find her, comfort her. Maybe have some drinks, just have a bachelorette party. This also gives you an excuse to stay up late. Or even not come home until the morning. We'll take my car and say we're too drunk to drive home. Tammy will back us up. You should pick out a nice little dress. Bring your high heels. Come to my house before Jerry gets back. Then you can leave in your regular clothes, change at my house, and leave as usual. Jerry, sitting here, won't suspect a thing. Leave me alone, you slut, Christine laughed. Now you should be a happy wife, remember. Also, I don't want to share Jerry with anyone. Sandra giggled. You share all of yourself with other men, but you don't want to share your man, right? No, the answer is, I don't want to share Bob with anyone. I'm a mature enough woman to give him everything he needs and still have leftovers for my boys. So, let's pack up your clothes and things and bring them to my house before Jerry gets back. Otherwise, we're done for. More accurately, nothing shines for us. I sat in the dark of my office waiting, thinking about what I had just heard. My supposedly loyal wife was unfaithful to me, at least with these 3 guys, and her 2 girlfriends. Who knows how many there were before them. I waited for them to come back from the bedroom. Let me first check outside to make sure Jerry didn't drive over. Sandra said, okay, the coast is clear, let's go. I heard the front door open and close. I went to the back door and walked around the house. I watched Christine and Sandra walk towards her house, 2 houses down the street. Once they were out of sight, I quickly turned left, and before I reached the next block, I was already dialing my brother's number. Everything inside me was boiling with anger. Yes, just half an hour ago, I loved Christine with all my heart. We had even discussed starting a family. What I heard overturned my feelings and filled me with anger. I dialed the number and called my brother. Jesus, man, Jason said after hearing my situation. I didn't even know they were doing something like this. Tammy's quite a hot chick, you know. Before I met Sue, I entertained her a few times. I've been wondering who she might be. Sandra's also a crazy card player. So, what are you going to do? Jason knew these girls almost as well as I did. I asked him to come and pick me up. When he came to get me 20 minutes later, the car dealer called to say the car was fixed. I asked him to take me there. We went to a barbecue place to have some beers. A few guys would meet us there. Jason said, as I paid the bill and walked out, I didn't feel like drinking, but Jason told me to be strong, to be present. I'll take care of you. I followed his advice. I recognized the 2 guys waiting for us there. They were mutual friends of my brother and me. They would cover for me. One of them had gone through a divorce a few years ago. He told me how bad it was, but then he laughed, repeating the old joke about why divorces are so expensive. They're worth it. I told the 3 of them, I really don't have much to lose in a divorce. We only bought the house 3 years ago, so we hardly have any equity. I've been focused on paying off my student loans as soon as possible, so we only have a few $1,000s in savings and accounts. Christine, as a sales consultant for medical products, earns about the same as me. Child support is not an issue, and there are no children. What I want is revenge, scorched earth policy. I want to find these jerks, to cause them as much damage as possible. I don't know who they are. After stating my goal, the three men started grinning. We can do that, they said. We'll go to the bar or wherever they go. I'll keep an eye out for these jerks, find out their license plate numbers. You know my brother is a cop, I can find out who they are. Did you happen to install the Find My Device app on her phone? Ed asked, and I nodded. Christine always leaves her phone places. Usually, I just call it and hear it ring, but sometimes it ends up in her car. For someone whose job requires so much phone usage, Christine is very careless. Without much thought, I decided to wait, to see if I could get information from her phone. Damn, man, Don laughed at my words, you're really not holding back on your wife, your future ex-wife. I corrected him. Jason and Ed called their wives, saying they needed to help a friend tonight and would explain everything later. Don is still single. He's still too shy to have a steady girlfriend. If it really came to that, how tough these guys would be to deal with. Ed asked me, just wanting to know if I needed to prepare a telescopic baton if necessary. I told him I had a baton and would carry it with me, but I wouldn't be there long enough to get into trouble. I planned to tell them they were caught, take a few pictures, and then leave. If Don could track these guys and get their numbers, that would be enough. Yes, a fight would ruin the mood for the day, a shootout would be worse. I knew Ed, Jason, and Don shared the same philosophy as me, never start trouble, leave if you can, but before you let yourself get beaten, you'll blow up another jerk. Hey, man, do you mind if I go to Christine's apartment later? Ed asked, grinning. As far as I know, you don't have to wait anymore. I've already ended things with her. Although you might have to make do with the leftovers of her boyfriends today. I responded with a smile. The only problem is, no matter how good she is, I'm not sure she's worth being your last sexual encounter. You know, once Melody finds out, she won't leave you alone. Don and Jason laughed. Their jokes made me feel a little better. The three of us prepared for the night's activities. Before I went home, the phone rang. It was Christine. Hi, baby, she cheerfully began. Look, I know we were going out to dinner tonight, but there's something. Tammy is very upset now. I think she just broke up with her last boyfriend. She needs to talk. Christine began. I asked Christine if she caught her with another guy. She paused in surprise. I don't know why, she's just very upset. She thinks this guy might be the last one. I laughed. I couldn't help it. She's just very upset. She thinks this guy might be the last one. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Seriously, she's upset. Sandra and I will go to her house, sit with her. Maybe we'll have a couple of bottles of wine. All you need to do is let her know we care about her. You don't have a problem with that, right? I never have a problem with someone taking care of a friend in need. I said, building strong relationships is hard, the kind of people you can trust, knowing they have your back, and always thinking about you. Christine seemed to pause, or so it seemed to me. Thank you, honey. I'll go out in a few minutes. I told her I would be home alone. A few minutes later. She was still there when I got home. Aren't you bringing a bag in case you stay overnight? I asked, when I got home, seeing her only with a handbag. For example, will you drink too much with Sandra and not be able to drive safely? She stammered, saying she had a toothbrush in her handbag. Yes, I think if it's just the three of you women, you can sleep naked. I laughed, and she blushed beautifully. She walked out the door. I hurried back to the room to take off my suit, change into jeans and a shirt suitable for going to a bar. I needed a shirt that could be untucked because I had the gun holstered on the right side of my waist. I put the telescopic baton in the back pocket on the right, wallet on the left. I hoped I wouldn't have to use either weapon, but if necessary, I would rather hurt someone else than myself. Arrest is inevitable anyway. I called my brother Jason, who was also rushing home. After we left the bar, he and Don switched cars to avoid being recognized. I walked out the front door and moved to the left. Jason grabbed me. We drove around the block, stood on the street, from where we could watch Sandra's house. We hoped they hadn't left yet. But to be honest, we thought the ladies would need time to get ready. An hour later, we both felt bored and sad. According to the Find My Device app, Sandy still had her phone, but I suspected whether she had forgotten it. I decided to call Christine. "Hey," I said when she answered the phone, "how's Tammy doing?" She paused. I didn't give her time to think. "Hand her the phone and let me talk to her. I'll comfort her a bit, maybe. I'll introduce her to a guy in my office." I helped Sandra. She and Bob seemed quite happy. "We're not there yet," Christine replied. "Sandra and I are still at her house." I asked why it took them so long to leave. Sandra made a few phone calls first. "We wanted to chat a bit before going to Tammy's house." Christine calmly replied, "We'll leave soon. Are you still at home, or have you already gone out to eat?" "Sorry, I don't have time to prepare anything for you." "No. Jason came to pick me up. We're planning to grab something to eat, maybe have a couple of drinks. Since you're coming back later tonight or not coming home at all." There was a sense of relief in her voice. She told us to relax. I suspected she was afraid I would go to Sandra's house, which would make it difficult for them to explain why they were dressed in revealing clothes or fully made up. If I just stood at the door, they wouldn't be able to change clothes quickly without being noticed. I hung up the phone, and Jason grinned. "Fun with them, right?" Then he became sad. "Of course, it's a pity that it's come to this." I nodded, but at least now I know, so I can minimize the damage and move on with my life. "So, you're not going to try to resolve this issue even if we don't find them tonight and can't prove their infidelity?" I shook my head. And said the conversation I overheard before was enough for me. 20 minutes later, Sandra's garage door opened, and she drove out. We easily followed her. The ladies had no idea they might be followed, so they probably weren't looking around. They were probably discussing the upcoming evening. I'll bet they won't even spend much time drinking. They don't have to seduce anyone, or even play the role of seducers. Their goal is just sex, as much sex as possible. I called Don and Ed to let them know the situation. They were already on their way. Sandra parked the car in the parking lot of a fairly quiet bar. We were all very familiar with this quiet place, a quiet place known as a pickup joint. There's some music, but mainly you sit, drink, chat. They decide if the other party is worth it. If not, then go home or wait for the next one. No one will give it a second glance, unless they are considering a future date. "Damn, Christine looks hot, and so does Sandra," Jason commented as they got out of the car. From our position, we could see the two women adjusting their tight skirts. The skirts might be a few inches below the buttocks, but not much. I wonder if they're wearing underwear. I shook my head. I know Christine isn't. She can't wear a skirt like that. I bet they're not even wearing underwear, unless it's a thong. I said roughly. Then they can easily put on a short performance for your little boy toys before starting business. Don and Ed arrived. They came over. I told them what the women were wearing. We watched a few men come in and go and we didn't know if they were Eric and Richard. I didn't want to go in too early and spoil the surprise. Ed said he would go in and see if the women were sitting alone or not. He and Don were both wearing baseball caps. I hoped Christine wouldn't recognize them too quickly. He called from inside and said he hardly had time for a beer. When the two guys sat next to the women, they kissed the women as if they were going to have sex in the bar. He told us where they were sitting. He quickly finished his beer, went out to help Don recognize the guy's car. He stayed nearby in case we needed help. When we went in, Jason and I took out our phones and started filming the scene. Without saying a word, we approached the four of them, filming them for a few seconds, filming how they were clinging to each other, intertwining their hands. Sandra screamed when she looked up at us. "Hello, beauties," I said, louder than necessary. the expression on Christine's face was priceless. She started to mumble something, "Keep being a bitch," I announced loudly. There was silence in the bar. "Don't mind me, and don't bother going home. I'll pack up your stuff and pile it on the lawn tonight. You can drag it to another trader's house after you've had your fun today." I pointed at Sandra with my free hand. "You can keep them after you no longer need me." I'm sure Sandra's husband won't want to see her after he finds out about all this either. When one of them started to stand up, "Don't do anything stupid." I turned a little and showed the handle of my Glock pistol on my belt. Even in the dim light, he turned pale. Jason and I turned and walked out. I wondered how long it would take to receive the first call or message. 10 minutes, yes. "What do you want? Is that guy done with you?" I asked sarcastically. I put the phone on speaker and let Jason amuse himself. "Damn it," Christine said. "Things are not as they seem. These guys are in town for business. One of them is an old friend of Sandra's. She needed someone to cover for her." I couldn't believe she was telling me this. Things are not as they seem. It might be what they could come up with in 10 minutes. I laughed. "Yes, one of the men, his arm around your neck so he could feel your breasts. His other hand was under the table. I don't know if it was under your skirt. It's not visible from the video, but it doesn't matter. You lied, you cheated, we're done." I heard Jerry pleading. When I pressed the icon to end the call, "You know I'm going to come home with you tonight," Jason said. I looked at him in surprise. "Don't argue. You've been on an adrenaline rush for the past few hours, driven by anger. You've been acting quite normal, although a bit nervous. But soon you'll crash, and it will hurt you. I'll be there, so you won't do anything stupid, collapse." I whispered to him, "I'm grateful." He handed me his phone, let me enter his contacts list, call his wife. What was she thinking? Susan, Jason's wife, shouted on the other end of the phone. I put the speaker on. She cheated on me. I threw her stuff into the yard. Locked the door. I had no choice but to laugh. "Thank you, Susan," I said. "I'm glad you support me. I'm grateful. If Jason cheated on me, I would do the same thing." Susan said, "If I cheated on him, I know I could expect the same or even worse treatment from him. Jason stayed with Jerry today, helping him. Maybe you should consider taking a few days off, go to the fishing camp, get drunk. Once you recover, I like my daughter-in-law." "Okay, first about the most important thing, whiskey, tequila, rum, or beer?" Jason asked when we stopped at my house. I replied that beer was safer. He brought 2 bottles and chilled a few in the fridge. "So, let's start packing her stuff," he asked, grinning. I knew in the end it didn't matter. I might not be able to keep her on the street. I don't care about the house, but it would be a statement. I plan to make this statement as public as possible. We took a trash bag and started putting her things in it. Starting with the clothes. We started piling them up on the front lawn of the house. This was done to avoid being accused of dumping her stuff. If you put things on the side of the road, it's usually considered up for grabs. Often during the gap and garbage collection, you might find appliances and old TVs or other things on the side of the road. Sofas and chairs are left there when apartments are being renovated. They are generally accepted as being given away. Anybody who wants them can take them. This eliminates the need for a trip to the landfill and provides an opportunity for those in need. These things are given away, anyone who wants them can take them. This eliminates the need for a trip to the landfill and provides an opportunity for those who need them. I put Christine's things next to the house. I told her the stuff would be outside and hoped I would be protected. I told her the stuff would be outside and hoped I would get protection. An hour later, all of Christine's clothes and personal belongings were on the lawn. I changed the combination of my gun safe and kept all the documents I wanted to protect. I went into my home office to make sure there was nothing irreplaceable there. I knew it would be difficult to hold Christine responsible for the loss if she threw away something important. If she got rid of some important things, after she got the house, she and Sandra drove over. "Are you really going to throw my things out of the house?" she screamed. I nodded. It was almost 9 o'clock. We had started our adventure early. I reached for the door, grabbed the air horn I had prepared for fishing and boating gear. I started honking. After a few loud honks, the neighbors emerged from the nearby houses. They immediately realized something unusual was happening. Some were holding their phones, in case things became very interesting. I walked out into the open, almost to the street. My wife, Christine, and her friend Sandra were seeing men and engaging in crazy, unrestrained sexual activities. I announced in a loud and firm voice. I heard Christine start to wail and plead behind me. Tonight, I caught them both at the bar with their boyfriends. If anyone needs proof, I'd be happy to show them the video clips. I don't want this woman in my house anymore. She can go stay with her friend. I'll move out in the next few days, then she can come back. We're done. I politely waited. "How could you do this?" Christine asked. She couldn't believe I had the courage to make such a public statement. Sandra understood completely what this meant for her. She knew that if I hadn't already done so, I would soon call her husband. She sat on the lawn crying. She and Bob had been married for 2 years, but they had a prenuptial agreement. Knowing her history, I pulled him aside and reminded him to be careful. "Trust but verify," I said. He took my advice. "You have no evidence to prove we did anything," Sandra tried to sound confident. "We were in the bar sitting with a few friends, it's nothing serious." I pointed at the bags. "It's better to pick them up, or they might get lost." I sincerely hoped the police would arrive soon, and sure enough, a patrol car arrived shortly. During all this, Jason was in my office, making sure that his and my content were uploaded to the cloud. I was busy explaining to the police how I caught my wife cheating. "The question is who will leave the house today?" An officer said usually it's the man. I said I'd be happy to, but my wife's things are already packed. He knew I was filming him. Now I'm not sure if my wife will smash or damage my property. I have a home office with confidential data from my work. So if you want me to go to her place, I hope I can protect my things. An officer was called. I repeated my position. It was hard to keep a straight face. He turned to Christine. "Mom, do you have a place to go tonight? A place to put your stuff for the night?" She nodded with tears in her eyes. I think the police would laugh when I offered to help Christine pack her things in garbage bags and move them to the street, to Sandra's house. Half of the neighbors were now watching the drama, some came over to help, hoping to hear the whole story. "Can we talk about it?" Christine pleaded. I replied that maybe in a day or two. Because of all the activity in my house, Eric and Richard thought they had gotten away, but they hadn't. Ed and Don watched them as they followed Jason and me out and watched us drive away. They kissed the women goodbye, but there was no affection because they might be watched by other patrons of the bar. The two men walked to their car, watching Christine and Sandra get into Sandra's car. Thanks to the delay, Ed and Don had enough time to remember not just the license plate numbers, but also the car makes and models. They even took pictures of the men kissing the women goodbye. They then went to the houses thought to belong to them. Ed and Don called Jason to see how we were doing. He told them to come to our house. We sat down and laughed at what we had learned. Ed looked at me carefully. Finally I looked at him and asked what. "Man, you're about to lose it. I'll stay to make sure you don't kill anyone," he offered. And Don was with him when he went through it. "What are you talking about?" I asked, starting to get very angry. "Man, I'm right where you are now, just like Ed said." Don said calmly. I spent days crying, thinking about what I had lost. Feeling sorry for myself. Before realizing how angry I wasn't sure if I was more angry at my own stupidity or my wife and her lover's deception. It's definitely them. I could barely control my anger towards them. I could barely restrain myself from the urge to kill them. Don laughed at the memory. It took several days, but I began to feel sad. Because I didn't notice the signs for so long. I felt like an idiot. What did you do? I asked. I suspected there was more to the story they hadn't admitted. Nothing much, just divorce the bitch. Don said with a half smile. Okay, I let the guy's wife know. Ed started to chuckle. I looked at him. Now I know there's more to the story. This is our official history. Ed said. Don lied, I swear. I'm sorry, Don, but Jerry needs to hear this. Don smiled and told him to continue. We launched a small-scale operation against this guy. On the side. The guy, of course, knew Crystal was married. Sorry, Don, we try not to use her name. Her new name is Traitor. That's what we call her. He explained. A day later, the guy was attacked. He never saw who did it. He didn't need medical help, just some ice to ease the swelling. Overall, even his wife left him completely broke after she found out about his infidelity. The guy continued to have various troubles. The garden shed where he stored his equipment caught fire and left him completely broke. The guy continued to have various troubles. The garden shed where he stored his equipment caught fire. His tires were often slashed. He couldn't even go to a bar without getting hit. When he fell, his testicles took several hits. He was very unlucky. His boss knew he was a cheater but didn't fire him. But told him he was on probation. When he tried to change jobs, this story followed him. This just means it's just bad luck, you know, Ed said. So, what happened to him? I asked. He moved to Georgia, trying to start over. Don said it was funny. But about a month later, his new boss found out why he left Louisiana. It turns out they don't like guys who frolic with colleagues like us. He's had a hard time for the past few years. Did you really tangle with him for so long? I asked. No one ever told me about this. It looks like you had to work hard to get rid of him. Hey, everyone should have their own hobby. Don said with a smile. I mean, I still fish and hunt. But I'm not married. So I have a lot of free time in the evenings. The clock is always urging me to do something. Unless, of course, there's a good movie on. Of course, Ed offered to tell him about her punishment. Yes, it seems she had a hard time finding a long-term boyfriend. I mean, more than 2 dates, Don said. Men may like wild things in the bedroom, but few like to hear their mothers are angry because they received video clips of his new girlfriend and her potential sister-in-law with several men. And all her colleagues have copies of her pranks. Don laughed, especially her male colleagues' wives, who naturally felt worried. I started to laugh. Now I regret not realizing. I said, wiping away tears from laughing too hard. I missed out on the fun. Don shrugged. It was fun, but I think it's time to move on. Although this bitch will always guess. It took a lot of effort. Of course, she knows who's behind her problems. A few months ago, she asked me what she could do to make me stop. I was very careful not to expose myself and let her set a trap. She would sue me to death. That's why I never told you. Only Ed knew. We laughed, and I started to think about what I could do. Let's think before we act. Ed suggested, you work a little faster. I mean, it's only been about 7 hours since you found out about all this. The others agreed. Jason reported that his wife Sue talked about taking time to go to our fishing camp for a drink. The camp technically belongs to our father, but Jason and I can use it any time. Of course, Ed said, I know my wife would agree, especially if I bring back a bunch of fish. Yes, and also, she might have a chance to join Christine and her friends when we're in the swamp. Don mocked his friend. No, our prenuptial agreement. Ed grinned. She would have to divorce me to get anything. Now, I feel sad for not protecting myself. I knew Christine's 2 closest friends were sluts in high heels. I should have thought about it. All 3 told me that we all make mistakes. Next time I'll do better. Finally, we went to sleep. I lay in bed wondering if I could sleep. Then I realized that the conversation with friends helped me more than a bunch of counselors. I felt much better. I turned over on my back and closed my eyes. I fell asleep. I woke up refreshed. I didn't even have a hangover. Christine wanted to talk the next day. I asked her why. She approached me in the morning. I told her I would only talk to her in the yard, not behind closed doors. The phone in my pocket was recording. She tried to explain how I came to the bar and prevented her from doing something stupid. You used to have fun with them, or with another friend of theirs, Brian, for example, I asked. She looked at me in surprise. She realized I knew more about her actions than what I saw in the bar the night before. She stuttered for a few seconds but didn't answer. I have good news and bad news, I said with a smile. She looked at me hopefully. The good news is, I paid off the credit card before canceling it. I also paid all our utility bills, so they're good for next month. Also, I paid off all our loans. We have no debt now. The bad news is, there's only about $700 left between our savings and checking. I took my half, I said. She looked at me in horror. I shrugged. Some of these bills are long-term. The bills we paid off, like the car bills, both cars are registered in both our names. If she can or won't pay, I know the bank will come after me to pay them. Well, you still have a few options, I said. You and Sandra can move in with your lovers. Or live with Tammy. I'm pretty sure Bob would kick her out as part of their prenuptial agreement. I plan to list our house for sale immediately. The real estate agent is the second call I plan to make on Monday. The first is to a lawyer. Can't we talk about this? Christine said pitifully. I asked, what's there to talk about? I tried my best to stay calm. My heart was broken, but anger took over. You decided to play a prank. Of course, you knew what would happen if I found out. Of course, you never thought I would do this. But as I said, you have a choice. Christine looked at me as if she had swallowed a baseball. Of course, if one of them is married, the situation might get complicated. I added. I haven't received reports on their private lives yet. I'm waiting for him to tell their wives if they have any. They're married, they have children, Christine gasped. You can't ruin their lives. Why would that be a problem? I asked, trying to make my voice sound as reasonable as possible. They don't care about their marriages or mine. So as far as I'm concerned, all the dirty laundry is thrown on the ground for everyone to see its true colors. Now if you don't have anything of value, why don't you go back to Sandra's house? She started to walk away, then turned around. Did you call Bob? She asked. I realized this was one of the questions Sandra wanted to ask. When Christine came back, I smiled and nodded. Of course, I told Bob I did this before getting drunk last night. I filled him in on the latest and passed on Don's advice about settling financial matters first. Bob doesn't have as much debt as I do, but he paid off and canceled his credit card, and took 75% of the available cash as required by the marriage contract. He's like me, knowing that once Sandra withdrew the money from the account, she wouldn't be able to give it back. Her meager part-time job barely allows her to drink occasionally and go out for dinner. Bob called me the next morning and wanted to know what I did. He told me he would be back in town later in the morning. Last night, while we were talking, I was busy transferring funds, half drunk. His anger and resentment were obvious. He really loves Sandra. Last year, he told me privately that he felt guilty for demanding a prenuptial agreement, but he signed it at my insistence. Last night, he reminded me of that conversation and said he was glad he listened to me now. I told him to get home safely and we would figure this out together. I watched Christine walk towards Sandra's house. She looked dejected. Her shoulders were slumped, and she dragged her feet forward. Of course, these women might come out victoriously and take back their lives. They're all beautiful, they just need to become professionals rather than amateurs. Online is a good option. If you don't become a call girl, they can make a decent living, if not a very good one. I regret not telling Christine a few minutes ago that I need to remember this phrase for the future. I gave the retreating figure the middle finger. One shooting part one was thinking about what Don said last night about everyone needing a hobby. His hobby was to tease his ex-wife and her boyfriend. I don't have any information on these three guys yet, but I know where he's vulnerable. Was it cruel, even unreasonable? Yes, but I did it anyway. I took out my phone. "Hello, Miss Sullivan," I greeted the woman who answered the phone. "When did you start calling me Miss Sullivan?" she asked. "Ever since you started dating Christine, I've been a mother." "Well, that's the problem." I said. "I love you. You've always been there for me, but everything has changed. I wanted you to know Christine and I are getting a divorce." Saying the nearly 50-year-old woman was shocked is an understatement. She screamed. "A week ago you told me you decided to have a child." "Well, that was before I found out Christine was unfaithful to me. I said she and her friend Sandra and Tammy would date three guys whenever they got the chance. As far as I know, it's an unrestrained sex party. Every time Christine went to my fishing camp, she would go there. She refused to go with me. Instead, she entertained one of the men." Miss Sullivan asked if I was sure. "I have an audio recording. Last night I followed her to a bar. Her behavior in the bar, of course, didn't pass the husband test. In fact, her behavior in most bars in town is unacceptable." I said. "I have a video recording." "What a stupid bitch," Miss Sullivan complained. "I thought she gave up her wild ways after she got married." She said. "It's true." She started to cry. "Stay in touch, Jerry, I have to go." She hung up the phone. I felt ashamed for hurting this lovely woman, but at the same time, I didn't want Christine to tell our family history and make me look like the bad guy. 30 minutes later, an angry Christine called me. "How dare you, you jerk," she shouted. "What did I do?" I innocently asked. "How dare you tell my mother I'm an idiot?" she shouted. "Isn't it true?" I asked. She cursed me a few more names and hung up. Bob showed up. He didn't even stop by his house. He wanted to talk to me first. After we talked, he got a copy of my audio files and a video of Sandra kissing a man whose hand seemed to be in places it shouldn't be. We went to his house. "I came to get my things, or at least a few days' clothes," he announced. Sandra looked from Bob to me and back. He took out his phone again. "If anything is damaged, destroyed or tampered with in any way, I will press criminal charges against you. Let this be notice," he warned. He walked through the house, filming a video. I didn't expect it. I took out my phone. "Christine, I'm going home to film our apartment. If anything is damaged or stolen afterwards, I will press criminal charges against you. Including if you let your lover into your house and he causes damage. I don't know if this is legal, but the result is great." Christine sat crying. I doubt she would think of damaging anything herself. But I won't take any chances. 24 hours ago, I couldn't even imagine she would be unfaithful to me. Bob grabbed a few days' clothes, and we brought them to my house. You know, I really thought Sandra had changed. She told me several times that she was a wild person. Well, as wild as she described. But now all that is in the past. She wanted to be my dear wife and the mother of my children. I feel like a fool. A few months ago, she even stopped taking her medication. Damn it, I hope she's not pregnant. Of course, I will do a DNA test, but even if I am the father, I will still be bombarded with child support. I told him not to worry before it happens. Don, Ed, and Jason showed up with a few boxes of beer. "So everything can be cured with beer, right?" I asked. "No. It just makes everything more bearable." Don replied. I told them what I did to Christine. Don laughed and congratulated me for getting help. Bob did something similar, protecting his rear. His debt was smaller, but now it's gone. He transferred his share to another account. Jason laughed and said the money in his checking account now he could go on a long trip, spend a few weeks in Cabo. Neither Bob nor I have an account where we can save money. I don't have much, but he does. We couldn't open an account last night, so we transferred the money to Jason's account. My brother copied down the car's license plate number. Officially, of course, he can't say anything, but I have names and addresses, Don said. I told them Christine said those guys are married, have children. Before I drank too much, I wanted to see what I could find out about these guys. I said, Bob, I kind of want a little scorched earth revenge. How about you? He grinned and took out his laptop. It was easier to find Eric and Richard than I expected. They both have Facebook profiles. There are photos of their wives and children. Their wives are on their contact lists. Finding each woman's cell phone number was as easy as shelling peas. Each man has several contacts named Brian. This pair is shared. We don't want to notify the wives of innocent men. I called, introduced myself, the wife of an innocent man. I called, introduced myself, Richard's wife. I quickly got to the point. I explained the whole situation. Saying the lady was angry is an understatement. He has cheated before. She was relieved to let him go out with 2 friends because she believed it would keep him from cheating. At least during those moments. Let me guess, Brian is one of these friends. But he was not available last night. Do you know his wife? Does she know? I asked if she would like to meet. I would give her a copy of the audio file I have and the video I shot the night before. She was very eager to meet as soon as possible. I suggested she call Eric's wife. Wife, she said she would do that. And Brian's wife. And call me to arrange a meeting. 15 minutes later she called me. I was surprised at the speed. She told me she wouldn't waste time. I made copies of my notes for the 2 ladies. We met at a local cafe. Bob and I sat and stood. When 3 ladies dressed casually walked in. These ladies looked about 30 years old, a few years older than us. They wore light makeup, but each one was very beautiful. I offered to buy them coffee, and they agreed. I played the original recording for them. After all this time, Catherine said. Richard's wife. I told them I don't know how these men met our wives. They had never met Sandra or Christine before. I opened a photo of Tammy. Brian's wife recognized her. She works with someone named Brian Torrey or something like that. I've seen her at a company event. I guess that's where it all started. She had an affair with Brian, which developed into formal dates with other women. I explained that I would file for divorce as soon as possible and how Bob and I handled the finances. I saw their minds turning. Well, I'm going shopping before I go home, Richard's wife announced. I've had my eye on a dress at a boutique. Maybe I'll find some dresses. I know a woman who bought a few things and then returned them for cash. Maybe he'll dress up and ask Richard if I look as good as Christine and Sandra did last night when he walks through the door. Just before I tell him to get lost. He'll know something's up when Eric comes home this afternoon and finds his stuff on the lawn. I'm sure Eric will call him as soon as he does. Even before entering the house, Eric's wife said. I told her I packed Christine's clothes. I might as well pack them just to help get them out, but then I would throw everything away. I would throw away all of his suits. I like the idea of you using a horn to alert the neighbors. You said they can be bought in any store's fishing department, I nodded. Bob and I laughed out loud. We'd better get started. They're playing golf this afternoon and will be home around 6 p.m. I wonder how many of their golf trips were spent with these women. Playing with their balls and clubs. Another round of laughter. I wonder how long this anger will last. Before the crying begins. These women are strong, but I remember Don's words. That's what I'm talking about. We've already discussed this among ourselves. After I caught Richard the first time, we even insisted that we all sign prenuptial agreements. Not one-sided, but containing severe penalties. We have a hypothetical plan to support each other, and how we will help or cover up for our husbands if one of them has an affair. Now we know they were all involved. Our children are already teenagers. They will find out about this today. They are quite old. Another woman nodded. We said goodbye and exchanged phone numbers. It seems the three of them decided to use the three women together to hide more easily. I never heard where they met. I guess it mostly started with Tammy. They thought everything was under control. Bob noted, "Thank goodness your car needed repairs. You didn't just wait." Back at my house, we spent the rest of the time drinking beer. Dinner, we had to order food because neither of us could drive. Sandra called Bob, he put it on speakerphone. "Why did you drag Tammy and Brian into this? They weren't even here last night," she wailed. "The three wives of the girls are threatening to divorce. Brian's wife said she's going to report this to Brian's boss. Tammy called to say she's very unhappy because she might get fired." Just then, I couldn't help it. I started to chuckle. "Let me ask you one thing," Bob said. "We bet you girls mostly met at Tammy's house for your little sexual escapades. Motel rooms would become very expensive, and the space is very limited." Sandra mumbled something, but didn't confirm or deny. "Well, Tammy is still in big trouble. It's a pity, but it's what she deserves." The following week's actions were as we expected. Bob and I hired the same lawyer. We used the services of the person who drafted his marriage contract. Christine and Sandra were served in the middle of the workday. Both houses were listed for sale. We used the same agent to list our homes for sale. We explained the situation and said that although we knew we didn't have much capital, we were negotiating the sale so we wouldn't have a large cash outlay. I often heard that any effort is 90% preparation and 10% execution. Divorce is the same. Once we got everything started, our work was almost done. Then everything was up to the lawyers. I found a small apartment. Dividing furniture and other common property was not difficult. Most of the things were sent to different warehouses. We sold the rest to a real estate company for cash. 7 years later, Sandra, Christine, and Tammy were roommates again. After losing her job, Tammy couldn't afford the rent on her own. She seemed to have a hard time finding another job as good as the one she lost. Her new boss somehow heard about the story. She and her roommates are sluts. Every colleague of Christine knew what she did to ruin her marriage. Her job seemed to have stagnated, but I bet men were still lining up to have fun even though their wives were on alert. Sandra's job at the mall wasn't enough to support her without outside help. Bob and I followed the girls' relationships for about a year after we got divorced. We took a page from Don's hobby book and let any man who dated them more than twice know everything about them. Finally, we got tired of it. Brian and Tammy were fired at the same time. I heard he had good job prospects. He certainly needed her. His minimum child support and alimony were set based on his postnuptial agreement. Although I sympathized with his family, his new boss and colleagues soon learned why he lost his previous position. He was not a happy guy. He was seen as an outsider. Richard and Eric didn't fare much better. Although they still had their jobs. Bob and I are now happy to be single. I'm now 29 years old and not in a hurry to remarry. Really, I have several options. One of the best is the sister of one of Jason's colleagues. I met her at a barbecue party at Jason's house. I know it was arranged. We've been dating a few times. She seems to be a good match in and out of bed. She occupies a lot of my free time. I've reduced my role in the campaign against the 6 traitors. We all hypothetically agreed to a prenuptial agreement if we get serious about marriage. She thought it was unnecessary. As she said one afternoon at the fishing camp, if my husband cheats on me, I would feed his ass to the alligators. My playful little girl. Thank you to everyone who took the time to listen to today's story. If you like it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.